Okay, hi everyone. Thanks for coming. So, on the 27th of December 2008, I went to my university to submit an assignment. I remember walking down the stairs from my class in my university in Gaza City at that day to exit the building. Suddenly, the ground started to shake. Glass broken coming out of the windows was coming on our heads. And then the sound and impact of the first raid of cast lead. We heard the sound and the impact. It was something like doomsday. Few seconds of headache that you have in your head because of the pressure of coming out of the bombs. I ran out with my classmates, and we saw pillars of smoke and fire coming out from several spots in Gaza City. This was the moment when the Israeli Air Force bombed the main police headquarters in Gaza City, targeting a police graduation ceremony. In these few seconds, 120 people were killed, hundreds were injured, and this was just the beginning. If you talk to any Gazan, you will hear this account as part and a small part of what later became the cast-lead story of everyone who was in Gaza and witnessed this aggressive war. Me being there wasn't only by myself. There were 1,700,000 Gazans. 1,700,000 stories. Each story represents a unique line of events that combine a collective experience of the Palestinians in Gaza Strip. On the morning of December 27, 2008, our guests, Rawan, Rifat, and Yusuf, and I, and some of the people here in the audience, we were in Gaza. On that morning, Israel launched one of its aggressive, bloody attacks on the Gaza Strip. 1,500 people were killed, thousands were injured, hundreds of houses were demolished, factories were destroyed, schools, mosques, universities, government facilities. These actions, according to the United Nations fact-finding mission on the Gaza conflict, or what was known later as Goldstone Report, were attacks on the foundations of civilian life in Gaza. It wasn't a war against Hamas or terrorism as the Israeli army claims. Hamas was and still in a good shape. It was a war against the aspects of civilized life, against the people. They wanted to push us back to the Stone Ages. They wanted to suppress our voices, to suppress our struggle, and to lead Gaza into a cycle of madness, a black hole of craziness, nothing but a war zone. Cast-lead wasn't the beginning. The process of destroying Gaza, isolating it, started long time ago and is still continuing. But cast-lead was a turning point in the struggle against this bloody occupation. It exposed the double standards and how relative humanity and solidarity is. But at the same time, the shock out of the aftermath moved the hearts of millions of free, honest, and sincere people around the world who took the initiative side by side with their Palestinian fellows to challenge this injustice. Today, being here with you, we are in a historical moment where the world is changing, and the struggle for equality and justice in Palestine is achieving impressive progress. Every day, Not only because of the screams of the wounded, not because of the blood of those who were killed in Mavi Marmara, not only because of the blood of Rachel Corrie, but also the words and appeals of those who committed themselves to their pens that are and were mightier than Israel's swords. Today, we meet a group of these freedom fighters, those who chose the pen to write and express themselves beyond deep political analysis or psychological assessments or shattered words or appeals. They chose to write back, to tell and to inform their oppressor that they are here, steadfast, alive, unbroken, creative, and willing to share their stories as human beings with other humans all over the world. It's the human experience of those who found themselves being targeted for no reason and chose to write back. Today, we, Students for Justice in Palestine, NYU, are happy and honored to have these heroes with us today, who came all the way from Gaza to share their impressive pieces that they wrote in English under the inhumane and tough conditions in the Gaza Strip. We are pleased to welcome Rifat Al-Arair, the editor of Gaza Writes Back, Rawan Yaghi and Yusuf Al-Jamal, two amazing young writers who contributed to this book, Gaza Writes Back. Unfortunately, Sarah Ali was supposed to be with us today. She got her US visa, but unfortunately, she couldn't travel because of the Egyptian closure of Rafah crossing and Israeli restrictions on freedom of movement, even though she received a permit to go to the US consulate in Jerusalem. But they gave her the permit to do the visa interview. And then when she applied for a permit to travel through Jordan, she wasn't allowed to do so. Also, we express our deep appreciation to the American Friends Service Committee and Just Word Books for co-sponsoring the tour of Gaza Writes Back in the United States. Please welcome Rifat Al-Arair. Rifat is a Palestinian academic from Gaza who's interested in young emerging writers. He works very closely with young Palestinians to help them develop their creative writing skills. I was his student in 2005, and I'm honored today to introduce him to you. And actually, he was one of the main reasons why I speak English tonight. Rifat is the editor of Gaza Writes Back. Gaza Writes Back is an anthology of 23 short stories by young Palestinians from Gaza. He has also been teaching world literature, comparative literature, and both fiction and non-fiction creative writing at the Islamic University of Gaza since 2007. Please welcome Rifat.
Thank you, Jihad, for this introduction. And welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being interested in Palestine, for looking forward to more about Palestine. Gaza Writes Back is, like Jihad said, is a book of fiction written by 15 young Palestinians, written in English. 12 of these 15 are females, which is something very important. It reflects the importance of females in the Palestinian society, the important role they're playing and they have been playing in the Palestinian struggle. The story of the book probably was, the seed itself was planted by a question my daughter Shayma asked during the cast-led operation 2008-2009. Shayma was only 5 years old then, and amidst the bombing and the killing and the shelling and the sounds of the drones and the F-16s, she approached me and asked, "Dad, who created the Israelis? I couldn't answer her. She shocked me. I never expected a question so profound from such a young girl. She looked at her mom, and she also couldn't get an answer. However, in order to distract her, to make her stop thinking of the pain, of the sounds of the planes, I offered to tell her stories. And then stories would follow, a story after a story. And at that moment, I still remember how I connected with how my own mother used to tell me several different stories about people she makes up, and about stories where someone whose name is similar to mine, is being punished for something I just did myself. And most importantly, I remembered how my mom would tell me of stories when Israel occupied Palestine, occupied Gaza Strip, how my mother came several times to near-death experiences. And probably I was young, but when at that time I started thinking of the possibilities of not having my mom then, and then me not being. But again, God meant something. My mom survived several, like probably the majority of Palestinians, especially those living in occupied territories. The stories of my mom and my own stories connected the past, the present, and connected the future of the Palestinians. The stories were stories of people struggling under occupation, stories of sometimes little kids trying to do practical jokes, try to trick the Israeli soldiers, the heavy armed Israeli soldiers. And at that time, I was also rereading Robinson Crusoe, a novel by Daniel Defoe, in which Robinson Crusoe enslaves a black man and names him Friday. In this novel, there is an insistence on the colonizer's narrative being the dominant, being the overwhelming, being the most powerful, while at the same time the voice and the narrative of Friday being suppressed, being marginalized to a great extent. At that time, I decided that we Palestinians have to do something in order to counter-attack, to defend ourselves in different ways, in new ways, in creative ways. We Palestinians have to be probably more creative than ever before, because we can never beat Israel when it comes to arms, when it comes to weapons, because Israel, you know what Israel has, and you know what Palestinians have. I decided from that moment to start a project with my students, a project that would include training those Palestinians who already have a very good command of English in order to write creatively, to resist the Israeli attacks on Palestine, the Israeli occupation in general, and to prove to the whole world that we Palestinians insist on life, that this act of writing is at the same time is an act of life, an act of resistance. When I went back to my classes, I asked my students, and pain was everywhere. Almost everyone in Gaza had someone hurt, someone killed. More than 20,000 Palestinians became homeless. 1,500 Palestinians were killed. Thousands of Palestinians were injured in the 23 days of aggression. The project started with my students writing personal experiences, expressing in a way to find a remedy for what they went through, in a way in what is called sometimes in the writing circles the therapeutic impact of writing. When you write, you release some of the anger, you release some of the frustration you have. And later on, we decided to upgrade the non-fictional personal articles into fiction. Because as a teacher of literature, I know quite well how important literature was and is and will be for us Palestinians. Literature and fiction, the stories here in this book, while they are very much deeply rooted in reality, they have this fictional sense. They probably did not happen in that way to the writers themselves, but they must have happened in Palestine somewhere, or even in Syria, or Iraq, or Afghanistan, or anywhere around the world, probably 100 years ago, or they might happen in the future, as long as there is injustice and occupation. Fiction meant to us, we decided to go for fiction because we also believe that fiction is universal. Fiction transcends the borders of numbers and statistics and names and religion and ideology and everything, and brings us back to our humanity, to the most important thing we have here. Fiction is going to, like we had this idea of fiction taking Palestine and taking Gaza to every corner of the world. And this is what's happening, not only because of Gaza Rights Back, because of the amazing efforts done by Palestinians and pro-Palestinians around the world. But I've been receiving feedback since the publication of the book on Twitter and on Facebook from people as far as Japan, New Zealand, Australia, South Africa, Nigeria, Ghana, Turkey, America, of course, Brazil, all around Europe. People contacting me, telling me they got the book, they read the book, and they are very much touched by the stories, the personal experiences, the stories that we have here. Therefore, this book, again, while a very important document in the Palestinian struggle to resist the aggression and the injustice and the occupation and the racist apartheid regime of Israel, it's also an act of literature. It has to be like this because our life is mainly basically influenced by politics. There are touches of politics, but at the same time there are social concerns. You'll find some of there are love stories in the book. There are stories about about the political division, about the class division in the Palestinian community. And while the book is about Gaza Strip mainly and written by people from Gaza who have never been allowed by Israel to go visit other occupied territories in the West Bank and Jerusalem, there are also several stories about Palestinians in the West Bank, in Jerusalem, and in diaspora. And probably some of the stories, if like you just change the name, they could be anywhere around the world. So this is an attempt for Palestinians to go global, to go universal, in order to emphasize that there are Palestinians, there are Palestinian voices who can represent themselves, who can speak for themselves, and who can like be very much creative in the way they resist Israel. And finally, going back to my daughter's question. Sadly, I couldn't find an answer to what to tell her, but I'm pretty sure that we are all created by one God. But every time Israel escalates the war against Gaza, every time there is an attack, every time Israel does something to humiliate Palestinians, I see the question in my daughter's eye. The question is not going to go from her mind. It's not going to go away because Israel insists on humiliating us, causing us pain every day. But however, I hope that this book is going to help the international and national efforts in order to mobilize for Palestine, to bring justice for all people living in Palestine. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Rawan Yaghi is a 20 years old Palestinian from Gaza. She started as an English literature student at the Islamic University. She then transferred to the University of Oxford in the United Kingdom. Rawan's writings primarily talk from in English following the attacks on Gaza where she started writing. Rawan believes in the power of writing in communicating the hardships young Gazans experience regularly. Please welcome Rawan as she is going to talk about her contribution to Gaza Rights Back and read an excerpt from one of her stories.
So Sarah's story is dedicated to her dad, and it speaks about a man who goes to see what happened to his land after the end of the 2008-2009 attacks. And unsurprisingly, he finds out that all of his olive trees were uprooted, and and basically everything that was on his land was taken away. I'll just start reading now. Gaza's sky was blue again. Things were over. The news said things were over. My father went there. He went to check up on the land. He put his faith in his olives being an exception, and he went there. He put his faith in that little white spot in the heart of the bulldozer's operator who, my father supposed, could not have resisted the beauty of our land, and who listened to his innate good being that told him not to run over this land. He had faith in the goodness of man, and he went there. He put his faith in God, and he went there. My brother, who accompanied him, told us later that all they saw as they walked was ruined lands filled with bulldozed dead trees, which seemed to suffice for the family's need of firewood for years to come. My brother said Dad started crying as he saw people crying. They went on. They saw more toppled trees, feeble and defeated. They went on. There was the heaven. The scene of our land was not shocking. Simply put, our trees were no exception. Our trees were gone. My father's faith, I could tell, was smashed into little pieces. The world seemed like an ugly place. One of our trees, which later became the subject matter the whole neighborhood spoke of, was still standing there. Just 1 week before the attacks, my father told my brother how slanted this tree was and how quickly they needed to get rid of it. They were planning to cut it, and yet, ironically, it was the only tree the Israeli army left. Out of boredom or out of mercy, I cannot tell. But it was still there. Later, whenever my cousins wanted to make Dad feel less terrible about it, they made fun of the whole thing. How the hell did the soldiers know you were planning to cut it anyway, and so decided not to cut it themselves? Everyone would start laughing, but Dad did not. His land and olive groves are not laughing matters to him. Speaking about the land, the houses, and generally the financial losses during or right after the Israeli offensive would have sounded very selfish and indifferent to others. When people are dying, you do not speak of your beautiful house that was leveled to the ground. When people are losing their legs and arms, leaving them disabled for the rest of their lives, you do not speak of your fancy car that once looked like a vase adorning the streets of your modest neighborhood, and that is now a gray wreck. When a mother is burying her child before she could say goodbye, you do not speak of your land and your trees that were mercilessly uprooted. Those people speak. They cry. They mourn. You listen. And for the memory of your insignificant little misery, you grieve in silence. And that seemed to have amassed more agony over Dad's pain. That an Israeli soldier could bulldoze 189 olive trees on the land he claims is part of the God-given land is something I will never comprehend. Did he not consider the possibility that God might get angry? Did he not realize it was a tree he was running over? If a Palestinian bulldozer were ever invented, I know, and I were given the chance to be in an orchard in Haifa, for instance, I would never uproot a tree an Israeli planted. No Palestinian would. To Palestinians, the tree is sacred, and so is the land bearing it. Between my father and his land is an unbreakable bond. Between Palestinians and their land is an unbreakable bond. By uprooting plants and cutting trees continually, Israel tries to break that bond and impose its own rules of despair on Palestinians. By replanting their trees over and over again, Palestinians are rejecting Israel's rules. My land, my rules, says Dad. So that was the end. I will now read some of my story, which talks about a little boy who is standing on the balcony of his house on the day where when his neighborhood was targeted by Israeli planes or by whichever planes. I stood there. Sorry. If you have the book, it's on page. What page is this? 48. Spared. I stood there cheering whenever my best friend Ahmed scored. Lunch seemed to take forever. I looked back. Mom was putting plates on the table. She looked at me and smiled serenely. She knew how much I wanted to go out and that I was staying because she made me. Come on, Mom, hurry. Ahmed's scoring all the goals, I complained. Almost done, dear. You won't be able to play on an empty stomach, will you? She said sweetly. I gave her a grumpy face and went back to watching the huge match. I rested my chin on the edge of the balcony, pulled my arms back, and kept my feet on the small blue plastic stool which my mother bought exactly for that purpose. She said I didn't need more than 10 centimeters to be able to view the street. Anything higher than that would cause a tragedy that no one in the family or the neighborhood, especially me, wanted to see. She terrified me with stories about children who climbed the balcony and ended up in the street with all sorts of broken bones. My little mind, of course, believed every single word she said, and I was always cautious not to dangle my head and arms when I climbed the balcony on the precious little stool. Ahmed, who sees the lull in the match, looked up at me and gestured a question. I shook my head and yelled, "Not yet." The kids laughed at me and went back to their ball. In a second, a huge light flashed right in front of me, and I was thrown back to the wall of the kitchen and then to its floor. Bricks hit the ground and smashed glass followed seconds later. My knees and hands were shaking, and I couldn't stand up for a moment. There was a strange noise in my ears that sounded like a very annoying non-stop whistle. Smoke was suffocating me. My mom ran to me, crying hysterically. She checked every part of my body to make sure I wasn't hurt. Then she hugged me. She immediately pulled herself up and carried me out of the house because smoke kept rushing in. My hands were shaking and my mind couldn't let go of the fact that all of my friends were playing in the street seconds ago. In a minute, my mother and I were standing in the middle of the street trying to breathe some oxygen, but all we were doing was gulping cement-filled air and coughing it back. Ahmed was gone. The others haunted me with their blaming looks every day I went to school. I couldn't look at them. Amputated limbs, scarred faces, limping gaits. Our neighborhood was blown into smithereens in a split second. No more games were played, no more goals, no more cheering. And my friends grew up in 1 second. They no longer looked at me the same way they used to before that awful day. They wouldn't come out to play, and they had a distant look, like Uncle Abu Ahmed when he looked at me, like I didn't understand, like they knew something I didn't know, like I did something wrong. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Rowan. Please welcome Yusuf Al-Jamal. Yusuf graduated from the Islamic University in Gaza in 2011. He is a blogger who's committed to promoting the Palestinian narrative in the West through translation and has organized, participated in, and attended dozens of lectures and courses on translation, creative writing, social media, blogging, and political discourse. He is the co-translator of the Prisoners' Diaries, Palestinian Voices from the Israeli prisons, and contributor to Gaza Writes Back. Yusuf is currently doing his MA in International Relations at University of Malaya, Malaysia. Please welcome Yusuf.
Hello, everybody. Thank you all for showing up today. It's great to see some of the faces that I have met in Gaza being present today, whether Palestinians and pro-Palestinians. I would like to thank Students for Justice in Palestine for organizing this, and American Friends Service Committee and Just Whale Books for co-sponsoring the speaking tour. I started writing in 2010, soon after the Castle operation in 2008-2009. I wrote my first article, which was published by Mondoweiss, and we have Alex Kane here, who was, I think, involved and still involved with Mondoweiss, called During the Time of the Siege. And basically, this piece, which was, I think, a crap, talked about, in terms of, fiction and creative writing, it wasn't a great piece, but my teacher, Rifat Al-Arair, who is the editor of the book, encouraged me to write more. By the way, I have to admit, Rifat is a great teacher, but he is a horrible friend. So,
he was nice to me anyway.
Yeah. He can be nice sometimes. So I started writing about my family's experience under occupation and how occupation affected my family directly. I wrote about my eldest brother, Omar, who was shot dead by Israel, by the Israeli soldiers who invaded our refugee camp in 2004, and who bled for 4 hours and passed away eventually after the Israeli snipers who surrounded the area prevented paramedics from moving him to the hospital, transferring him to the hospital. I wrote about my eldest sister, Zainab, who was 26 years old when she was denied a permit to travel to the West Bank to receive medical attention, and as a result, passed away in 2007. I wrote about my mother, who was born and grew up in the West Bank, in Beit Sahur, in Beit Lahem, and who was denied a permit to visit her family for 12 years. In 2003, her father passed away, and she couldn't participate in the funeral procession because she was denied a permit by Israel for unknown reasons. And her mother passed away also in 2008, and she couldn't participate again in the funeral procession for the same reason. I wrote about current issues in the Gaza Strip, occupation, travel restrictions, traveling in and out of Gaza as a student, difficulties I faced going back to Gaza back in summer 2013, and how I was sent back again to Malaysia from Cairo by Egypt, and how I managed to travel to Malaysia for bicycle after 6 weeks of trying because of, again, the borders. My story, Omar X, that I contributed to Gaza Writes Back. is about my eldest brother who was shot by Israel, as I mentioned. On March the 6th, 2004, I was making some fried potatoes to kill my hunger, and this is the only thing I can make because I suck at food and I largely depend on my mother. So my brother rushed to the house and he asked me to share some of the fried, delicious, I think, fried potatoes with him. But I refused. So he started, begging me, talking to me, and asking me again and again, and I refused like countless times. Then he talked to my mother, who intervened, and I finally agreed. We signed an agreement, and I shared some of the fried potatoes with him. This was Omar's last dinner. The following day, 50 military vehicles, Israeli military vehicles, invaded our refugee camp, Nusayrat refugee camp, and shot 14 Palestinians dead, including my eldest brother, who, as I mentioned, was left to bleed for 4 hours and eventually passed away. This was not the end of the story. I rushed to the site of the killing the following day, and I found some of his belongings on the ground, including his cell phone, which was full of blood. When I checked the numbers he tried to dial as he bled, my parents' landline came first. So Omar was trying to reach us and probably to say a last goodbye, but he couldn't. So this story is to immortalize him, to remember him through fiction, and let other people know about him and the other 14 Palestinians who were killed that day. As Omar was thinking of us, of the family, when he was bleeding, this story also to remember him, to make him now and forever. Again, as I mentioned, this was not the end of the story. 2 years later, and in Palestine we have huge families, extended families. We can make like a tribe sometimes out of the family. I have 6 brothers and 7 sisters. Yeah, mashallah. My mother delivered another baby boy, and as expected, named him after my eldest brother. So I ended up with 2 brothers named Omar. One is the eldest, one is the youngest, one who used to take care of me when I was young, and one who is being looked after by me now. So this story is about the younger Omar and the older Omar, and the complexity of playing the role of someone else. Because for a long time, especially the first 3-4 years when Omar was the younger, was growing up, he used to think that he is the older Omar. For example, when someone mentions that Omar's friends are going to visit us, he would say, "Oh, my friends are going to visit us," because he didn't know, he didn't realize by then, he was too young to realize that there is another Omar. And the same goes to my nephews, my nieces. When they see the photos of the older Omar, they mix between the two. So this story is about the younger Omar and the older Omar, to shed light on one of the most important issues that is neglected by the mainstream media, which is kids named after their dead brothers and sisters. So I will conclude by reading an extract from the story. Those who have the book, page 109. Sorry, 107. I will read the first paragraph and then the last 2 paragraphs, because I don't want to spoil the story. Omar X. The night was silent. The moon hid behind some summer clouds. His smile revealed his young age. His steps beat the ground slowly, looking for the path. The thump sound of a helicopter was getting closer, penetrating the peace of the crowded refugee camp his family had lived in since 1948, and the familiar noise of tanks rolling in violated the silence of the night and decreed that he will never sleep again. He got into his khaki uniform hastily, grabbed his gun, and rubbing its dusty barrel, stormed out of the house. As he waited a little at the doorstep of their house to make sure no one was watching, his eyes wandered right and left, and finally met the eyes of his friend who was murdered 3 months ago and is now immortalized in posters stuck on the walls of the camp. Those honey eyes of his best friend always brought him comfort. As the helicopter moved away for a while, silence prevailed again. Soon after, Saad joined him, and together they entered an orange orchard. Saad insisted on going in first. Omar followed after Saad, made sure no soldiers were around. The place must be safe. Let's get closer to that building in the middle. We can see things clearer from there, Omar suggested in a whisper. Despite her love for her first son, Omar's mother could do nothing to stop him. She wanted him to study hard to pass his high school final exams. Just study hard this year, then you can put off your education for a few years, Omar suggested, urging him to focus on his school. I will bring you a certificate that will make you raise your head proudly high in the sky, Omar would say to comfort his increasingly worried mother. As he bled, a song he loved and always sang jumped to his mind. My mother prepared me a comfortable bed. She made me a leather pillow and wished me eternal happiness. This is your bride, shining like a diamond. Omar was too fragile to take out his mobile and make a last call to his family. He kept bleeding, and the bullets kept coming. He swung his head to his right, face down. Saad was lying lifeless next to him. He gathered enough strength and extended his hand over Saad's body, and before he could do anything, his hand fell down. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so now we have Q&A session.
And that is, what are the challenges and rewards of writing in English versus writing in Arabic?
Yeah, so I rarely write in Arabic because maybe my standard Arabic is not as good as it's supposed to be. But I think why I chose English is because I can have a bigger audience if I write in English, and my stories can reach to more people if I write in English. I also didn't want my stories to be affected by translation. I wanted to write directly in English. I didn't want things to be taken off by translation because the translator would think this would be a better option than another one. If there are things that I want to keep from an English from an Arabic speaking character, for example, I would still keep it. So I think that's all I have to say.
In addition to what Rawan said, I think addressing Palestinians in the diaspora is another important thing for me. That's why I write in English, to have greater audience. Basically, most Arabs know about what is going on in Palestine, and the tough mission ahead is to educate people outside and to do so we have to write in English.
What sort of response would be satisfactory to you, would give you hope, would make it worthwhile for you to have connected with people around the world?
My friend here said that the book is in English to reach greater numbers of audiences. The book targets almost everybody, but mainly we intend the book to target people who speak English and people in America and in England, probably in particular. But again, the book is open to translations, Arabic, any language. We're fine with translating the book. What we expect is like probably somebody mentioned here, I'm not sure, or elsewhere. In the stories themselves, when you read the stories, there's always this insistence to narrate, to tell, because telling is remembering, and remembering is forever. And this is the most important thing. And once I tell you a story, I expect you to tell the story to 3 or 5 or 10, and then they take it from there. And then the narrative, the idea, the pain and the hope, the death and life, despair and hope again, are shown to the people around the world in order to have probably a better understanding to what's going on in Palestine. Like I said, something important about fiction here is that it takes us everywhere. It's timeless. It's global. So what we expect from the people, not because of this Gaza rights back, we're here to promote Palestine first and foremost, but then to promote the book and books like this book. So we expect people to convey the message of hope, the message that Palestinians insist on life, the message that the Israeli racist apartheid regime has to go, and that equal rights should be in Palestine, should be to all people, regardless of religion, not only privileges given to Jewish people and not given to Arabs, Palestinian, to Muslims and Christians. Everyone has to be equal in order to live in peace in Palestine.
So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the freedom that Palestinians in Gaza have to pursue academic and intellectual pursuits.
It's the problem of Palestinians not being allowed to move because of Israel, because of the siege, is something that started long time ago. And Israel always plays this dirty mind game of allowing somebody to, like Sarah, what happened with Sarah. They allowed Sarah to go. They gave her the permit to go to Jerusalem to apply for the U.S. visa. And when she got the visa and she was very close to achieving one of her big dreams, coming to the United States, she was denied a permit, probably in a way to pressure her, to push her to frustration, probably to make her collaborate with Israel, like what happens with so many people I know. I know someone who finished 4 years of medical school in Turkey, and then that was like long time ago when Israel was still controlling the Rafah border. And when he came to visit, he wanted to go back. He was not allowed. They said, "You're not allowed to go back unless you give us information." And he refused. He decided to go back to Gaza and start over from scratch. Personally, I was, as an average, ordinary Palestinian academic and student, I was subjected so many times to Israel's restrictions on my movement. In 2001, I had a grant to do a 3-week course in translation in Manchester. I was kept for hours in Rafah. I was interrogated in a way or another to push me into certain things. In 2005, I also had a grant from the Ahmadis to do an MA in London. They interrogated me and they sent me back. I lost 1 year. I started my MA a year later because of Israel, when Israel withdrew. In 2010, I also got the Fulbright scholarship to do a PhD here in the United States. And still Israel did not give me the permit to to come and do my PhD here, and lost that amazing, wonderful chance. So, and this is what Israel is doing to almost everybody in Palestine. The restrictions on the movement of books coming into Palestine. Sadly, this book that is written by Gazans about Gaza is almost everywhere in the world, but it's not in Gaza Strip because Israel, again, restricts the movement of everything coming in and out of Gaza. So personally, I am 100% for all kinds of boycotts against Israel, especially academic boycott, because the least I can say here, if I say, okay, let's not boycott Israel, I'll be betraying my friends who Israel keeps preventing from traveling every now and then. So BDS all the time.
Israel and freedom are like an odd couple, I would say. In 2008, 2009, Israel destroyed one of the main buildings in my university, the scientific lab buildings at the Islamic University in Gaza, and they destroyed dozens of schools and killed dozens of students, and now they are keeping thousands of students stuck in the Gaza Strip and preventing them from traveling to seek education. If we see what happens to Palestinian students in the West Bank, who have to cross unlimited number of checkpoints going to their universities every day. So Israel, I think, should shut up when it comes to freedom.
What about Palestinians inside Israel, like Jaffa, Nasrat, Haifa, as well as in the West Bank? Wouldn't they be interested in reading this book, given the huge division, right, the physical division that a lot of Palestinians, of course, as you know, have no idea what's happening in Gaza, right? There are so many prejudices on the West Bank towards Gaza. In particular, I think a lot of Palestinians on the West Bank would be surprised to see the amount of female writers in the book. I'm sorry to say it, but so wouldn't it be would it be benefiting for the cultural sort of coherence and coordination between Gaza and the West Bank, in order to distribute a book like this in the West Bank, of course, you have to mediate with the boycott, right? Because Israel is always at the checkpoint. Do you understand what I mean? That we have to be practical with the boycott?
The thing about Israel is Palestinians, Israel is still an occupying power. Gaza is occupied. If somebody tells you Gaza is not occupied, they're lying to you. Gaza is 100% being controlled by Israel from land, from sea, from air, like in every sense of the word. Palestinians' lives are being controlled by Israel. So, of course, we have to deal as Palestinians living under occupation with the occupying power. But that's not collaboration. We're not trying to be going back to what the Palestinian Authority sadly is doing, always giving excuses, extending Israel's excuses to continue its aggression against Palestinians. We have to do this. As Palestinians, we have to do this. Like, we can't tell Sarah, for example, not to apply for a permit because Israel is controlling areas. We have to do this. This is part of the struggle. We keep trying. We never stop. We never give up. Beautiful there to some extent. The weather is beautiful on so many levels. Gaza is a very nice place to be there. However, when it comes to times when Israel is escalating, attacking, it turns the whole situation into a very heated, very tough place, even to move around. When it comes to people buying and shopping and doing like daily life routine stuff, it's usually problematic when there's a siege. It has been there for ages, but sometimes it's tightened, and then there is lack of food, and lack of almost everything, medical equipment and everything. Therefore, sometimes in a blink of an eye, it turns from quiet, normal life into a living hell. of course, aside, but again, what normal is relative, because like nowadays, and it's been the case for like 7 or 8 years, we only have electricity for 10 hours, almost 10 hours a day. And nowadays it's normal when we have, life is normal when we have 10 hours of electricity. But sometimes we have 4, we have 6, sometimes we have more, and then that's why we adapt, we try to adapt, but we're not trying to make this the reality. We try to protest this, to convey the message that we're living under injustice and oppression. When it comes to salaries, that's also a problem, because there were like new studies about a huge number of people unemployed in Gaza, because more than 90% of the factories were destroyed by Israel or shut down because Israel wouldn't allow the raw materials. Israel doesn't allow the building materials. That's why tens of thousands of Palestinians are unemployed. Sometimes the salaries are late, and people living on $300 or $400 a month would probably try to stretch the buck to like one salary for 2 months. It's not easy, but usually people get closer and closer when life gets difficult and difficult. It's not easy to describe Gaza. You have to be there, to live there, and to live there for a long time to sense the depth of the problem here, the crisis.
There is always a good thing about crisis. For example, when electricity goes off, I think it's very good time for family and socializing.
Israel has a very strong control over the Palestinian-Israeli narrative. Do you also feel like there's a shift in how people are understanding Palestine and looking at the situation?
Of course, we see it and we feel it, of course. But let me tell you something about Israel and occupations of all time. Occupation is boring. They do one thing. They keep doing it, which is death and destruction and causing and humiliation to others. That's what Israel has been doing since day one. And they're doing the same thing. They're not changing even the way they're doing it, except that when they use like high-tech technology to kill Palestinians, as many of them as possible sometimes. On the other hand, usually the occupied people, resistance, and especially Palestinians, and probably everywhere, but I have to be biased to Palestinians, we're very creative, we're very innovative and productive when it comes to how to resist. And if you go through history, you see how Palestinians probably tried several different ways to resist this kind of injustice imposed upon us by Israel and backed by the superpowers around the world. There was the armed resistance guaranteed by international law, and there was the peace talks. Probably we differ about which one is better than the other, or which one is more productive or fruitful. And nowadays we have, recently, we have the amazing BDS movement mobilizing around the world for Palestine. And guess what? Israel is still reacting the way Israel reacted to armed struggle, the way Israel reacted to peace talks, the way Israel reacted to, and is reacting to BDS. It's the same. They want to silence Palestinians and non-Palestinians, pro-Palestinians. They want to mute us. Okay, if you don't like violence, if you don't like that, why are you not okay with non-violent, amazing, creative movement that tries to bring all people on equal foot, like equal rights? Because Israel has a lot to fear. Because Israel wants to hide the fact that it's a racist, apartheid entity. And that will not last forever. Like all occupations around the world in the past, they ended in the way they ended. And the Israeli occupation is coming to an end soon.
As the youth of Palestine, what do you see as the way forward?
Say again?
What do you see as the way forward to stop this cycle?
The reality on the ground, you should know that the West Bank is shrinking. And Gaza is also shrinking because Israel keeps stealing land and building settlements. So Israel is making the two-state solution impossible. On the ground, it's impossible. Go to the West Bank and you're going to it's crazy. I've never been to the West Bank, but I have my friends from the West Bank who I met outside Palestine because I can't go to occupied territories in the West Bank, because Israel is making this option impossible, and because this option failed. They've been negotiating about this for the past, like, 500 years or so, probably, after the dinosaurs went extinct. There should be something else, something more creative, something where Israel is pressured, Israel is isolated, like what happened to the apartheid regime in South Africa, in order to push them into a solution that, again, guarantees equal rights for all.
I was wondering, how do you feel, or what is your connection with Palestinians in the diaspora as Palestinians living in occupied territories?
And probably in the last few years, again, with Twitter and Facebook, I started connecting with Palestinians in the diaspora more than before, because Palestinians are scattered between Gaza, the West Bank, and Palestinians in Jordan, Syria, etc., Lebanon, and elsewhere in the Western diaspora, Canada, Europe, and America, and Latin America. So one day I tweeted, I want to talk to a Palestinian in Latin America. And I got 3 tweets, and then I met some Palestinians living in Chile and Honduras. And now I have connection with Palestinians, Palestinians working for justice in Palestine, and in Europe, America, in New Zealand, Australia, Latin America. So with the social media, this became very easy to organize, to educate, organize, and agitate.
There's something about the book that probably I mentioned. The internet helped create a virtual Palestine from all over the world, from areas occupied in 1948, West Bank, Jerusalem, Gaza, and diaspora, because we all suffer in our own ways, in our own different ways. The book tries to bring them together on one platform. Again, despite the fact that the stories, again, of Gaza writes back, but some of the stories include narratives about Palestinians in Jerusalem and the West Bank suffering from the wall, the checkpoints and everything, and even from people living in the diaspora and suffering the fact that they can't just simply buy a ticket and go back to Palestine whenever they want. So this book, with the help of the internet, is bringing all sorts of Palestinians together in 208 pages.
Last question.
I could imagine that this type of book, in this type of situation, there's a lot of people that would want their voices to be heard. So I guess my question is, did you have a lot of entries that it was very hard to decide, and then when you did decide what stories went in, why did you choose those?
This question. We had close to 100 entries, submissions. The idea from the beginning was to choose 23 stories to attack the 23 days of the war on Gaza. So that was the thing we did. So it's not a matter of whether these are the best stories out there. I'm sure there are plenty of amazing stories out there. Probably we can include them in another project. So yes, there are wonderful writers. There are wonderful stories out there in Gaza, like Jihad mentioned. Probably 1 million people, and each one of them has tens of stories to tell. And hopefully this can be another book project, or probably another book project that would include entries from the West Bank, Jerusalem, areas occupied in 1948, diaspora, of course. Thank you very much. Thank you.